Call to order. I would like to do a quick roll call, and I think one trustee is online. Is Trustee Paola online?
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. The rest of the trustees are in here. Call to order. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular board meeting of the Halton Catholic District School Board on Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube channel because we do not have staff available to man the electronics at the background. Trustees, in order to be recognized, please use the hand up feature in Teams to be automatically placed in queue. Trustees, please remember to turn your desk mics on when you speak. And please remember that if you speak when you're not recognized or when you do not have the floor, your mics will be muted. Item 1.1, Land Acknowledgement, Opening Prayer, Our Father, and National Anthem. I ask staff to please start us off with the Land Acknowledgement.
Halton, as we know it today,
is rich in the history and modern traditions.
Many First Nations and the Métis.
From the lands of the Anishinaabe,
to the Attawandaron,
the Haudenosaunee,
and the Métis.
These lands surrounding the Great Lake
are steeped in Indigenous history.
As we gather today
on these treaty lands,
our Catholic social teachings
call us in solidarity
with our Indigenous brothers and sisters.
So honor and respect. For direction.
Winds, waters, plants, animals, and ancestors
that walked before us.
All these wonderful elements of creation exist,
gifted to us by our Creator God. We acknowledge and thank
the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation
for being stewards of this traditional territory.
Thank you. Trustee Chua, would you please lead us in the opening prayer, the Our Father, and the National Anthem?
If everyone can join me in the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. As the dawn breaks on the new year, let us give thanks for all that we hold dear, our health, our family, our friends, and our HCDSB community. Let us release our grudges, our anger, and our pains, for these are nothing but the binding chains. Let us live each day in the most loving ways, the God-conscious way, and let us serve all who need. Let us remember that we are all one, embracing all. May our year be filled with peace, prosperity, and love. May God's blessing shower upon our HCDSB community and bestow upon each of us a bright and healthy, peaceful new year to come. We say this all in saying the words that Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Thank you, Trustee Chua. Motions arising from in camera. There were 3 motions arising from the in camera session. Trustee Kennedy,
In favor.
Trustee Owen Chinara,
In favor?
Vice Chair Agnew,
In favor.
Trustee Murphy,
In favor.
Trustee Saunders. Favor. Trustee Kelly,
In favor.
Trustee Bowie,
In favor.
Trustee Chua,
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma,
In favor.
Trustee Paola, are you there?
I am. I think you have your sound off. I couldn't hear you. I could see you talking.
Okay, my sound is on. Okay. Would you mind, are you on your laptop? Would you mind turning your camera on? Or are you calling in?
No, I'm on the phone.
Okay. How do you vote, Trustee Paul?
I vote in favor.
Okay, thank you. Yep, so we have 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstention, motion carries. I will now read the second motion. That the result that the Halton Catholic District School Board approve the property matter that was adopted in camera. May I have a mover for this item? Trustee Carabella moves. Looking for a seconder, please. Trustee Saunders. I shall now call the vote on motion number 2. Trustee Powell, how do you vote?
Vote in favor.
Trustee Kennedy,
In favor.
Trustee Owen Chinara,
In favor?
Vice Chair Agnew,
In favor.
Trustee Murphy,
In favor.
Trustee Saunders. In favor. Trustee Kelly,
In favor.
Trustee Bowie,
In favor.
Trustee Chua,
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma,
In favor.
Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
So we have 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstention. Motion number 2 carries. We have another motion which I will now read. I will read the third motion. Resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board approve the property matter that was adopted in camera. May I have a motion, a mover for this motion?
Agnew?
Moved by Vice Chair Agnew, looking for a seconder. Trustee Saunders. I shall now call the vote on motion number 3. Trustee Kennedy, how do you vote?
In favor.
Trustee Owen Chinara,
In favor?
Vice Chair Agnew,
In favor.
Trustee Murphy,
In favor.
Trustee Saunders. In favor. Trustee Kelly,
In favor.
Trustee Bowie,
Favor.
Trustee Chua,
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma,
In favor.
Trustee Carabella,
In favor.
Trustee Powell.
In favor.
Thank you. So we have 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstention, motion carries. Moving on to the next order of business, which is approval of the agenda. Do we have any additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda? And do trustees want to remove any of the items in the consent agenda? Trustee Carabella, I see your hand up. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to say that items 6.2 and then items 6.7 to 6.13 are not action items and do not need approval. So I would say that they do not belong in the consent agenda as we are voting on those items. So in fact, because they are actually notices of motion and they would be together in that consent agenda, we're all voting for all those items. So I think they should be removed into their regular spots.
Thank you, Trustee Carabella. Let me go to Parliamentarian Kapoor and get his input on that. So Trustee Carabella, this is the advice I have. Item 6.2 to 6.7 that you are talking about, they can be taken out, no issue with that. But the idea of putting it in the consent agenda, and that's what our bylaws talk about, is putting together items that generally do not need a discussion. And this is done to save time and make an efficient board meeting. So that's the idea of the consent agenda. So of those items that you talked, is there something that you want to ask questions in future? Is that your intention? Or do you need further clarification?
I would like further clarification. I myself would like to point out that 9.7 in our bylaws says that consent items are not include, but are not limited to approval of the minutes, resolution of absentees, and action items recommended to the board from a committee. So all these items are something that we vote on. Whereas information items, I'm not opposed to putting information items together in a maybe going forward in a block of consent agenda that is information items. But because we actually go through a motion of voting on the consent agenda, so all those items we're voting if we're in favor or against. And this time, because it has included notices of motion, it brought to my attention that we really can't vote on a notice of motion. That it can, we're not going to have a discussion on those anyways, because the notice of motion is just a notice of motion, but that it wouldn't be voted on. It would just be included as an information item.
So let me ask Parliamentary Kapoor to himself communicate with you. He's the very idea of the consent agenda. Parliamentary Kapoor.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Chair, the idea of consent agenda is also to deal with items that would otherwise be up for discussion. So that if you have, for example, item 6.2 could be the subject of a question from a trustee to you about the status of an item. So it's not just for action items, but also for information items that may lead to discussion. I believe the idea of putting notices of motion here is just in order to, again, stay efficient and without having to name each item, say that notice of motion has been delivered and received and move on. But Trustee Carabella is correct that there is no opportunity for comment or discussion on items 6.7 through to 6.13, but there is for 6.2.
Thank you, Parliamentarian Kapoor. So, Trustee Carabella, the idea of consent agenda is not a new concept at all. This is done everywhere in all boards, municipalities everywhere, and the same pattern is followed everywhere. The idea is if you want to take something out from here and have a conversation about it, we can. We can take out everything and then have a nice long discussion. It's again up to trustees. So it's put in here because the thinking when the agenda was created, the chair, vice chair, and director sat together and said, okay, these items probably will not have discussion, but again, it's up to trustees. The idea is to have an efficient meeting. So, Trustee Carabella.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe for this time we can take them out, the notices of motion, which don't need discussion anyways. And I still have an issue. I understand the concept of a consent agenda. I think there need to be maybe two, one that are really action items where we're actually voting. And the other ones could be just, we pass over them. We don't actually vote. So if I can take out number 6.2, I don't plan to have a discussion, but I take out 6.2 and 6.7, 6.8, 6.9, 6.10, 6.11, 6.12, and 6.13. And that would mean that the motions would be read. The notices of motions would be read, no?
Correct. It does not necessarily.
Not necessary?
Sorry, the way the bylaw is written, once a notice of motion is submitted, it is considered as read.
Okay, thank you.
So it does not need to be read. So, Trustee Carabella, what I'm hearing from you is you would like to remove items 6.2, 6.7, 6.8, 6.9, 6.10, 6.11, 6.12, and 6.13. Okay, thank you. Trustees, anything else? Any other questions? on the agenda, approval of the agenda? Seeing none, I shall ask for a motion to approve the agenda. May I have a mover?
I'll move it.
Moved by Trustee Murphy. Looking for a seconder. Looking for a seconder.
I'll second it.
Trustee O'Hearn-Chinada. I shall now call the vote on the approval of the agenda. Sorry? No, is it amended? As amended. Okay. Approve the agenda as amended. Trustee Powell? Trustee
In
Powell?
favor. I'm here. In favor.
Trustee Kennedy?
In favor.
Trustee O'Hearn-Chinada?
In favor.
Vice Chair Agnew?
Favor.
Trustee Murphy?
Favor.
Trustee Saunders?
In favor.
Trustee Kelly?
In favor.
Trustee Bowie?
In favor.
Trustee Chua?
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma?
In favor.
Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
We have 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstention. The agenda is approved. Moving on to the next order of business, which is declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest to be declared tonight? Seeing none, we shall move on to the next order of business, which is presentations. The first we have one presentation tonight, and it's a senior staff update. Director Klein, could you please introduce the presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, Mr. Chair. Some trustees would be, I guess, recognizing the refrain that we are starting a new year, that we're at the advent of a new year, threshold of a new year. And so despite the fact that we are heading into the last part of January, in many ways, this school board and many other school boards are looking to the 2023-2024 school year. And one of the most important aspects of that is registrations in our kindergarten programs. And of course, we have other programs as well, not least of which is our French programs. So we have a brief report that's been put together by Superintendents Donalfo and Kroll. And I'm going to ask Superintendent Donalfo to speak to this right now.
Thank you, Director Kroll. Good evening, trustees. This evening, I'm presenting a senior staff update with regards to steps we are taking for kindergarten registrations and the optional elementary French program in our schools. To begin, we have our promotional video about the Halton Catholic kindergarten program that has been shared through our various media and social media platforms to inform parents and guardians about the kindergarten program. Special thank you to Andrea Swindon and the communications team for preparing the video, and to our curriculum consultant, Jacqueline Priest-Brown, and lead early childhood educator, Lisa Camiso.
Kindergarten is a play and inquiry-based program. It's a 2-year program, and over the course of those 2 years, children explore and experience many different learning opportunities that the educators are carefully crafting and supporting in those early years. At Halton Catholic District School Board, your child will be welcomed with open arms by caring adults. Our teachers and early childhood educators create environments where every child feels success and a sense of belonging. In our kindergarten programs, the indoor environments are as unique as the children in the classrooms because they're based on the children's interests, their strengths, and their wonderings and curiosities.
Children grow within the kindergarten program through all aspects of their lives and all aspects of development. They grow socially, emotionally, academically, physically, and spiritually. Our classrooms and our programs meet the children where they are. Our educators are very responsive to the needs of children. They value them and they help them to develop through age-appropriate activities and experiences, both inside and outside.
Our outdoor spaces are awe-inspiring. They're a favorite place for many of our children and our educators, and they're often called an outdoor classroom where learning becomes fun.
Children will have the opportunities to pray together, to reflect, to express gratitude, to build friendships, and to become lifelong learners.
Parents are a critical part of the kindergarten program. We know that our families are the first and most important educators of our children. And we know that through collaboration, through communication, through sharing of learning, that our families can become important parts of that program. Our educators not only report on learning for their students formally 3 times a year through the communication of learning, but also report and share information of documented learning over the course of the year with families.
So after enrolling your child at Halton Catholic, you will receive some communication from the specific school that your child will be attending to confirm enrollment. You will also have the opportunity to participate in Ready, Set, Go, where you will learn how to support your child in transitioning into the school system, whether they're coming from home or coming from another childcare program.
After that, your school will reach out with a parent information night, and you can get more information about the specific unique circumstances of your own school and what to expect when your child enrolls, and more about the kindergarten program specifically during that time. When choosing Halton Catholic District School Board, you're choosing to be part of a family. Our educators create spaces that are warm and inclusive, where every child feels a sense of belonging and a sense of success. We hope that you choose to join our family. Kindergarten
went to all of our year 2 kindergarten parents about the grade 1 French immersion program. And then there was social media posts throughout the week. The week of March 20th, reminder emails will go to our year 2 kindergarten parents about the early French immersion program, and a series of social media posts will remain until the registration deadline.
Thank you, Superintendent Dinolfo.
there's any
Director
questions.
Klein, would you like to add anything else, or should open the floor to trustees for questions? Are you done? Yep.
No, nothing to add.
Thank you, Superintendent Dinolfo. I shall now open the floor to trustees. We have on speakers list, Trustee Saunders and Trustee Carabella. Trustee Saunders, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just would like to know through you to the superintendent, do these programs bring kids into our schools, or are they kids that are in our schools that are just transitioning into these programs?
Superintendent Dinolfo.
Thank you for the question, Trustee Saunders. Are you talking about the French immersion program or the extended French program?
The grade 5 program.
So the extended French program, where we take new registrations to that program and new to our board, is in the Halton Hills area. So in Georgetown, we traditionally bring in students because many of those students might be in the French board and come to our board for the grade 5 extended French program.
Thank you. Trustee Saunders, you have a follow-up?
Just a quick one. So I noticed that we still have people on a wait list. Do we, generally speaking, use that wait list up, or are there kids that don't get the opportunity, normally?
Thank you, Superintendent Dinolfo.
Trustee Saunders, so the wait list for the extended French program, a lot of those spaces will get placed, and if where our greatest need for spaces is in Milton, but we do offer to the parents if they are willing to go into, because we have openings in the Oakville area, they're offered that. But again, they would be responsible for their own transportation if they're out of their boundary.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up is Trustee Carabella. Trustee Carabella, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask how the Oakville schools are meeting the demands of registration, and if you foresee opening another school in Oakville for the French immersion. Just wondering about.
Superintendent Dinolfo.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Trustee Carabella, for the French immersion program in Oakville, the 2 locations are St. Mary's and St. Marguerite. We had 4 classes for this school year at St. Mary's, and we had 2 classes at St. Marguerite. So again, based on the registration, we opened up as many spots.
Thank you. Trustee Carabella, do you have a follow-up question?
No follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not see any other hand up here. Trustees, any more questions for staff? Seeing none, Director Klein and your, I see Trustee Saunders, you have your, okay. So seeing none, Director Klein and your staff and Superintendent Dinolfo, very good job with the French program and the promotion of the program. Thank you so much for the good work done. We shall now move on to the next order of business, which is delegations. Item 5.1. One delegation was declined for this meeting as the script was not submitted by the deadline per policy I06 delegation to the board, bylaw 12.4. Detailed information on this item and the decision has been shared with all trustees. Moving on to the next order of business, which is consent agenda items. Following items have been agreed upon at the agenda: approval to stay on the consent agenda: items 6.1, 6.3, 6.4, 6.5, 6.6, and that's all. There will be a single motion to approve the consent agenda items, and there will be no discussion. I will read the motion. Resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board approve consent agenda items 6.1, 6.3, 6.4, 6.5, and 6.6 on January 17th, 2023 as submitted. May I have ask for a mover, please?
I'll move it.
Moved by Trustee Murphy. Looking for a seconder, please.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Trustee O'Hearn Chanara. I shall now call the vote. Vice Chair Agnew.
Favor.
Trustee Murphy.
In favor.
Trustee Saunders. In favor. Trustee Kelly.
In favor.
Trustee Bowie.
In favor.
Trustee Chua.
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma.
In favor.
Trustee Carabella,
In favor.
Trustee Paola,
In favor.
Trustee Kennedy,
In favor.
and Trustee Ohan Chanara.
In favor?
We have 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstention. The consent agenda carries, the motion carries. Our next order of business is business arising from previous meeting. Item number 8, 8.1, summary of outstanding items from previous meeting. The chart of outstanding items is provided in the agenda package for your information. Trustee Carabella, I see your hand up. I think it's from the previous one. I shall lower your hand. Sorry, something went wrong here. Okay. So 8.1, summary of outstanding items is in your package. I did not see any hands up. We shall move on to action items. Next order of business is action items, which is 9.1, policy I06 delegation to the board. Trustee Ohan Chanara, can you please read the motion? Trustee Ohan Chanara.
Yes, thank you, through Mr. Chair. Just give me 1 second to get myself organized here. I have to read it on. Is it on the screen? Can we put it on the screen for my capability? Thank you, Rosie. The following recommendation is presented for the consideration of the board. Be resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board accept the recommendation of the Policy Committee that policy I-06 delegation to the board be approved.
Thank you, Trustee Ohan Chanara. Trustee Ohan Chanara, you have moved the motion. The policy has come to the board from the Policy Committee and does not require a seconder. Trustee Ohan Chanara, do trustees have questions? Do you want to speak to that? Trustee Ohan Chanara.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I'm first in line here.
Yes, Trustee Ohan Chanara, go ahead.
Okay, so policy I-06 delegation to the board was discussed at the last policy meeting and has come here. It's come to our attention, and all of the trustees here have been made aware that there is a mismatch between one of the items under requirements and our actual current bylaws. So I'm looking to you, Mr. Chair. I can show you it's bullet point number 14 on the delegation that's come to the board for approval. It talks about when the complete script and presentation must be delivered or sent electronically. We currently have in the policy that's come to the board for approval 4 p.m. on the Wednesday prior to the board meeting, but that is a mismatch to our current bylaw 12.4, which indicates 4 business days at 1 p.m. So all the trustees here are aware of that prior to this meeting, and I'm looking to you and the rest of my fellow colleagues as how do we want to deal with this?
Thank you, Trustee Ohan Chanara. Yes, there is a discrepancy noticed between the delegation policy that we had a wholesome discussion at the last policy meeting and the procedural bylaws. They should go hand in hand. So again, can we highlight that item? Which bullet are we talking about, Trustee Ohan Chanara?
It's bullet number 14 under requirements.
Can we go to that section, please? Yes. Okay. So the first bullet, trustees, you see on your screen, a complete script and presentation must be delivered or sent electronically to the office of the Director of Education and Secretary of the Board by 4 p.m. on Wednesday prior to the board meeting. Our bylaws section 12.4 says that it is 4 business days by 1 p.m. There is a discrepancy there, and the bylaws generally have high preference over the policy. And so up to trustees, we could do it by a friendly amendment and make both of them sync. Or trustees okay with that? Let me go around the table. Trustee Carabella, are you okay with going by the bylaws?
Yes, to keep it Thursday at 1 p.m.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Trustee Chua, Trustee Paola, are you okay? Trustee Paola?
I am. I'm like that.
Trustee Kennedy, you're okay with that? Trustee Ohan Chanara?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Trustee Kelly, are you okay with that?
Yes, in favor.
Trustee Kennedy, Trustee Saunders? Yes. Okay. Trustee Kuzma, Trustee Murphy, you okay with that? Trustee Bowie, Vice Chair Agnew? Okay, and I'm okay with that. So, Trustee Ohan Chanara, there's unanimous consent. and changing that to match with our bylaws. So the wording, do we want to change on the screen? I'm not sure we do have any staff to help us today, but Rosie, are you able to change that? Okay, okay. Let's see that.
I can read it out. I have the original
Okay,
policy
okay.
in front of me. If
Okay.
that would be helpful, Rosie, what would you like me? Okay. Okay, so this is the original prior to our policy meeting last week, and it reads, a complete script and presentation must be delivered or sent electronically to the Office of the Director of Education and Secretary of the Board at least 4 business days prior to the regular board meeting in brackets by 1 p.m. end bracket.
Thank you. Thank you, trustees, for the unanimous consent on that item. So we have a couple of hands up here. We have Trustee Kelly and Trustee Carabella. Trustee Kelly, you have your hand up. You have the floor.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I just had a question. I know that we had fully discussed this policy, had a very wholesome discussion just last week. And just in regarding to the 6th point, we did thoroughly discuss about how we would appeal a declined delegation. And I know that we mentioned it would be either through in-camera or public complaints. I just was wondering, for the sake of clarification, would I be able to make a friendly amendment to just include that wording as well on the policy itself, just so that trustees and any other stakeholders who are aware of how to make an appeal to a delegation or declined delegation would have that sort of clarification.
Okay, so Trustee Kelly, could you point us to that location?
Yes, the 6th point of the under requirements, I believe, of that policy.
Okay, let's have the policy up again.
Yes, it was the 6th point under requirements, where it starts with the Director of Education and Secretary of the Board will share. Just because last week during our discussion, we mentioned that it would be made during an in-camera board meeting, declined delegation, if that's correct, through you, Chair.
I can barely see this on screen here. Let me take my. Trustee Kelly, what would you like changed over there?
Just for clearer wording that describes how we would appeal a declined delegation in regards to doing an appeal during an in-camera board meeting.
Do you have the wording to go there? Do you have the? Oh.
Yes, I would like that if all other trustees have any.
Trustee Kelly, is this your intent?
Yes, I would be open to any other amendments that trustees may or may not want to add.
Okay, so should I go around the table? Are you looking at a friendly amendment? Okay, once again, go around table. So trustees, this is the suggestion from Trustee Kelly. Addition of during the in-camera session words to be added to this particular bullet point in front of you. Do we think we can get unanimous consent? I'll go around the table and trustee, sorry. Okay, there are a couple of questions. So trustee, just put your hand up, please, for in the chat box, and we shall do a couple of questions, and then we'll go around the table. Trustee Ohan Chanara, I saw your hand up there. So Trustee Ohan Chanara, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So I just have a question. I want to make sure, because we did it once, I don't want to do it again. If we're talking about during in-camera, does this meet what our bylaw says as a topic for an in-camera session?
So I'll check with our parliamentarian Kapoor. Does this meet with the bylaws, Parliamentarian Kapoor?
That's the legal question, Chair.
It's illegal
in terms of what's allowed in camera. Sorry.
Yes, Trustee Ohan Chanara, there are 5 items which the Education Act specifies which shall be in camera. During discussions outside declined delegation discussion in the public session, if we touch on those 5 topics, then we would have to go in camera. So that's the answer to the question. What this specifies here is, in general, any item, any declined delegation would be discussed in camera, which really does not meet the requirements of the Education Act. So your suggestion, I would say, is out of order, Trustee Kelly. So if you want to reword that and come back to trustees, I'll give you the opportunity. Okay, so I'll go around to the next trustees, or they have their hands up, and then I'll come back to you. Sounds good? Okay, thank you, trustees. Trustee Carabella, you have your hand up. You have a specific question, or?
Well, I have 2 things. Just one back to the first amendment, the friendly amendment we made. Do we want to put in the brackets Thursday at 1 p.m. or just leave it as the 4 business days?
I see Parliamentarian Kapoor.
Right, because yeah, I think it just.
So Trustee Carabella, our practice now has been Thursday at 1 p.m. And we have been following that. If I'm not sure we need to add the word in there. If you go by 4 business days, technically it's Wednesday. It depends how you start your business day, where the business day starts from. So I would suggest just leave it the way it is at 1 p.m. Let's follow our practice that we have been following religiously over the past several years. And it's Thursday at 1 p.m. That's what we all take it. Right? Trustee Ohan Chanara?
Sorry, just a note. If we change it to Thursday, we would actually be changing the bylaw again. So we'd have to go in and change the bylaw because the bylaw says 4 business days, Trustee Carabella. And if we were going to change it to Thursday, which I understand where you're coming from, we'd have to change the bylaw too.
So Trustee Carabella, again, we'll have to go back and fix the bylaw and put Thursday in the bylaw to make sure that.
Well, this is just, sorry, Mr. Chair, may I speak?
Yes, Trustee Carabella.
It's just to clarify for parents to make the delegation easier. So they come in here and they're trying to figure out, okay, which day is it? And it's just for them, it's for clarity. It's not changing anything. It's just for clarity to show them it's Thursday at 1 p.m. I don't think you have to change that. The wording has to be exactly the same. Still 4 business days, but we've added that point of clarification. But, you know.
I think, Trustee Carabella, we're just trying to keep the language the same. So I would suggest when we're going to amend anything in the bylaws, we add that word there and then come back here. I'm just trying to, keep everything the same and uniform so that there's no misinterpretation there. Okay, thank you, Carabella. Your second item? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Just back to, back to here's my page 2. It's the first one under requirements. Here it is. And right now it says an initial response to the delegate will be provided by 12 p.m. the following day. I think And as they read through the delegation and they know that they have to provide a detailed request. So I think they should get the response. I'm not sure if the word initial response is a good one. It should just be yes or no. And I think it should be more clear. And I thought that better phrase could be the delegate would be advised by 12 p.m. the following day whether their delegation has been granted or denied.
Thank you, Trustee Carabella. And yes, we did discuss this in detail. The reason why it's initial response is that on many an occasion we go back and forth on the initial okay. There are delegations that comes only with the title sometimes. Only the title is given, and then we have no idea what it is about. So then we have to go back. So the requirements of this bylaw is quite clear that you have a title with some detail, and that gives us an idea. Now, we typically do that in the first 30 minutes, so 1 hour or so. But this is just put in by trustees to give a little more leeway in case we are busy with something else or not. And so that's the initial response. Yes, you can delegate, or no, you cannot delegate. So that's the initial, that's the meaning of the initial response. There are many occasions in the past where we have gone back and forth. And so that's the reason I put.
A follow-up, Mr. Chair, because we spoke about having that form, which would really clarify this whole paragraph. So we don't have a mention of that here.
Correct. Correct.
So should we be mentioning that, you know, like click here for the form to apply?
Yes, thank you, Trustee Carabella. I think that's a great idea. I think Trustee Vice Chair Agnew brought it up to the in policy. So yes, it's a fantastic idea. That's going to solve 99% of our problems and decision making. That's something which requires to be done. I do not know how long it's going to take. Maybe I'm going to bounce this question to Director Klein, and he will let us know how long it's going to take, and that gives us an idea. Director Klein?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's such a brilliant suggestion. I think we should all take credit for it. But I have looked into it, and this is very feasible. I know other boards have done this as well. I know Trustee Agnew has done a little investigating, and so have others. So this is doable, and I think we could probably have something created in days, if not weeks.
So, direct, once again, so let me just go back to the same question. So what's the timeline you think so that trustees are aware of this and we could...
For the
form?
The form? Yeah, I've been told that we could probably have this done within the next couple of weeks.
So
at the latest.
Trustee Carabella and trustees, we talked about it, and I think it's a great idea. Can we add this to business arising from meetings, and so we can go back and revisit it, trustees? Yeah, sure. So let's add this Director Klein to business arising from meetings, and then we'll visit this in a couple of weeks or maybe a month or so. So creating the form for online submission of delegations. And then we can have another discussion. So Trustee Carabella, till the time this form is created, I don't think it would be appropriate to put anything in the policy. Thank you. Moving on down the speakers list, we have Vice Chair Agnew. Vice Chair Agnew, you have the floor.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to go back to try to assist Trustee Kelly a little bit. So can we just go to the area where we were talking about denied delegation appeal? Sorry, Rosie. Okay. So where the appeal part is. Yeah. Thank you. I'm trying to scroll with my finger, but it doesn't work. Okay. I think the challenge there, and let me just read through it quickly. Appeals to the decision. Okay, so the challenge here, and I understood what Trustee Kelly was trying to do. Appeals to the decision must be made by a trustee. clear, and shall come before the Board of Trustees for decision. Where is that coming before the Board of Trustees for decision? We just heard that it's not able to come in camera. So at what point are we going to gather trustees to be able to hear this and make a decision? I think that's important that that be outlined here.
So Trustee Vice Chair Agnew, if I recollect correctly, we did have a situation in the past where a delegation was declined at the board table. So when we go to the section where we say decline delegations, it's an opportunity for trustees to challenge that.
Just clarification then. So in the event that that is actually what's going to transpire, then that needs to be in here. So it would say shall come before the Board of Trustees for a decision. I think you need to outline, is that during a regular board meeting? Is that, because I don't want a trustee to go through the trouble of challenging a delegation denial, get to that part in the agenda, ask to deny it or ask to appeal it, and then not have the opportunity to actually speak, present their appeal, and then have the decision made. I agree it should be at that part of the agenda, but then if that's the case, then I think it needs to go in here. I think the wording needs to outline exactly where this was going to come before the Board of Trustees for a decision.
So, Vice Chair Agnew, I think it says over there, comes before the Board of Trustees for decision. Right there.
No, I see the wording. Yeah, where physically does it happen, Mr. Chair? So it comes before, so just walk through this process. Bear with me for one moment. So there's been a denial of a delegation. That, particular delegate has spoken with their local trustee. They like to appeal that decision as they are permitted to do so via our policy. When do they do it and where do they do it? And I think saying before the Board of Trustees for decision doesn't indicate where that's going to happen. And we've just heard it can't happen in camera. So if it can't happen in camera, then does that happen at a regular, at the agenda item at a regular board meeting? If that's the case, then I think that should go in here to be clear, because if not, where does it come before the Board of Trustees?
Maybe I'll defer it to the Chair of Policy.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So thank you for directing the question. And Trustee Agnew, I'm wondering, so we've had 3 questions tonight. So we've had a question on the form. We've had a question on putting the word Thursday in for the deadline and the appeal itself. Could we not put that under the blanket or the umbrella procedure? Because once, and if this I06 policy gets approved at the board table, now it's over to Director Klein and his staff to create a procedure that supports our policy. So I'm just asking out loud to Director Klein, the form that could be put in the procedure. You could actually put the word Thursday in our procedure so that the intent is 4 days prior to is a Thursday, and scripting out what the procedure looks like for an appeal.
Thank you, Trustee Wanchanada. Director Klein.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Trustee Chernada, that was exactly what I was thinking. Like we're in the realm of the procedural now, right? So we've got the frame, as it were, and I think it's up to the procedures to begin to add a little bit of siding to it and give it a little bit of shape and form.
Thank you.
And even though that's operational and we should stay out of the operation, it still would come to us as a board to take a look, correct? For information.
Procedures are brought for information. And so, yes, Vice Chair Agnew.
Thank you. So, and I don't disagree that it should go in procedure. I think my challenge is that, as we know, we don't get involved with procedure. So I would want an assurance that in this particular, it is operational, but this is our delegation policy, right? This is people coming to delegate before the Board of Trustees. And so as such, I think we do have some ownership here on this piece. So I would respectfully ask that, with respect to this particular procedure, that we are at some point able to see that procedure and ensure that these things we're talking about this evening are in fact included. So that would be my only concern, because we do stay out of procedure. And even when it comes as an information item, we don't often say, can we change that in the procedure? So just wanting to ensure that these matters that have been brought up tonight, specifically on this point about outlining how the decision is heard, I think we just need assurance that that'll be in the procedure, and that we will have a chance to take a look at that procedure before it's finalized.
Okay, so thank you, Vice Chair Agnew. So we have a couple of questions here, and we have some more hands up here, which will go around. Looks like there's lots of uncertainty about this. Trustee Owen Chanara, I'm just wondering whether this should go back to policy for another wholesome discussion. Is this something you want to think, or should we just continue with the questions?
You're asking me personal opinion, and I don't want to speak on the board, but as a chair of the policy, I think we should deal with a few of these items here and see if we can kind of close the door.
Thank you. Okay, let's
Unless
go.
there's something major, but I don't think there is. I'm trying to read the room.
Okay, let's go around then. Let's continue going. Thank you, Vice Chair Agnew. Trustee Owen Chanara, your hand was up next. Was it for? I see your hand up here. Okay, Trustee Bowie, you have your hand up. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I just had a quick question for the wording for clarity's sake. I know we discussed in policy that if an appeal is successful, the delegate will be invited to the next regular board meeting. Perhaps that could be a way that we add clarity to the policy. So it has to be brought up in the board meeting in which the delegation was declined, and then they can appear at the next regular board meeting. But I don't know if that's more operational and procedural in nature. So perhaps to Director Klein.
Director Klein.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the points and the observations that are being made here tonight are part of that next conversation that we'd have with regard to procedure. And it's important that when we create the procedures that we're sensitive to and responsive to what we're hearing here tonight.
Thank you, Director Klein. On the speakers list, we have Trustee Carabella and Trustee Kennedy. Trustee Carabella, you have your hand up. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think I have one little one and a bigger one, and I just got to start with the bigger one because I think maybe this is something that might bring it back next to policy. So at the policy meeting, I asked about, so this deals with the standard response to delegation. And I asked that it does include a notice of motion. And we spoke at the policy meeting that in fact one of our bylaws 9.14 allows us to bring a notice of motion for a delegation. But now, Mr. Chair, you have proposed a notice of motion actually taking that section completely out. So for me, that causes me an issue because I think that we should have that. I think that whole bylaw 9.14 that you wish to take out is a big discussion, and it will affect our policy, our delegation policy about how to respond.
Thank you, Trustee Carabella. So first of all, that's a notice of motion. That's for a discussion at another point in time. But since you asked the question, I'll just throw in a few of my thoughts here. The idea was that if you want to, there's some item of urgency, then trustees can always put an action item with unanimous consent, and that's bylaw 9.8. Says trustees can put an action item, unanimous consent. If you want to put a notice of motion, then you need two-thirds of the vote, and that's bylaw 9.8 again, where trustees can put a notice of motion at any point in time. So if you do any of those two items, then 9.14 becomes redundant. But again, that's for discussion another point in time, and it is what it is right now. Okay. Yeah. Second question, Trustee Carabella.
Well, so I don't agree with that. So I think this motion needs, like, well, I guess you're saying that we have to wait till we go through those bylaws at the policy meeting. So maybe we should postpone this until then, until we get the results back.
So Trustee Carabella, am I hearing that you're making a motion to postpone this or move it back to policy?
Well, let's finish. I'll think about it.
Okay.
I have another follow-up.
Thank you. Your follow-up question then, Trustee Carabella?
Thank you. In bullet page 3, number bullet 8. It says there may be up to a maximum of 5 delegations at any one meeting. At the discretion of the chair of the board, additional delegations may be added as deemed appropriate. I just wanted to say from past experience, when we've had many delegations to the board, it was kind of a decision made by a chair and in consultation with the trustees. In particular, it was for school closure, which generated maybe 17 or so delegations. And it was a decision made with the other trustees when it was surpassing the 5 delegations. So I just bring that to the table for discussion if any of my fellow trustees would see that there are some times when we want to be involved in a decision on how many delegations if it surpasses the 5.
Thank you, Trustee Carabella. Do I have any comments on this? Trustee Carabella, I do not see any comments on your item. Okay, Trustee Carabella, I've given you your question and your follow-up, and your 3 minutes for questions is done. And we move on down the speakers list. We have Trustee Kennedy. Trustee Kennedy, you have the floor.
Oh, I just wanted to, after hearing Trustee Agnew speak, I would like to see something in that same point number 6 about where the appeal gets spoken to. And I think the idea of putting it at the point, say in this agenda item would be section 5, decline delegations. That's where I think would be reasonable to put it in. And, Trustee Agnew, would there be a friendly amendment coming for that?
As of now, Trustee.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Trustee Kennedy, as of now, there is no amendment. If you have something to suggest, you could suggest that, and we'll go around table and see if there's unanimous consent and trustees are okay with that.
I'll defer to the language that Trustee Agnew was thinking of writing in there. And then if we could have a vote on a friendly amendment.
Let me go to Trustee Agnew. Trustee Agnew, is there any thought on the language that you wanted to put?
So yeah, I mean, I think we'd have to, so the subsequent discussions seem to focus on putting the details into a procedure as far as where the actual physical appeal and decision would take place. But I think to your point, Trustee Kennedy, perhaps outlining without a lot of detail, just that part, at what point during the meeting can a request be made to appeal a denied delegation? Right? So I think then we're not getting into the weeds as far as how, when, where, and all that kind of stuff, but we're saying that, and I don't know, Trustee Kennedy, if this is along this lines of what you're thinking, but you know, if we were to say something like appeals to this decision must be made by a trustee during, or you know, during a regular board meeting upon what, I'm not good with right now. Okay. At item, whatever the item is that we have for denied whatever that, thank you. Item number 5, denied delegation. And then at least they know at what point it, so if a stakeholder is expecting that, or if they're waiting for that, or a trustee knows when they can make that appeal. And then I think, again, the other part would fall to procedure. Does that make sense? Is that what you're, okay.
So back to you, Trustee Kennedy, you was your question. I'm coming back to you.
Sure.
What's the language that you...
Appeals to this decision must be made by a trustee during the discussion of declined delegations? Is it always number 5? Could it be another?
Oh yeah, our order of business deposit, right? Yeah. Oh, we're there. We should probably clean up that last. Yeah.
So, trustees, can you just take a scenario where a delegation has been declined and explain to me how it's going to work in practical ways? So there's a delegation which declined. So during a regular board meeting, approval of the agenda, You discuss it at the approval of the agenda?
When we get to item number 5, decline delegations.
As in today, when you mentioned declined delegations, the chair could ask, are there any appeals? Speak now.
At that point, the trustee can put their hand up and
Right.
say, I'd like to
Okay.
make an appeal on the denied delegation.
Okay. Thank you. So Trustee Kennedy, you have some wording in there. Do you want this to be an amendment or do you want this to be a friendly amendment?
Friendly amendment.
Okay, so in order to be a friendly amendment, it will have to be unanimous and there will not have to be objections to this. So I'll go around the table. Trustee Kennedy, Trustee Carabella, are you okay with adding this? Trustee Carabella, fine. Trustee Chua?
In favor.
Fine. Trustee Powell?
I'm in favor.
Trustee Kennedy, I'm assuming you're okay with that. Trustee Ohonchanada?
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be contrary. I just want to ask the question for the greater of the good.
Go ahead.
If we have this discussion at section 5 of the agenda for denied delegations and we make an appeal, we won't really be able to discuss it too fully. The name of the, what's the debate? What's the discussion going to be? Can we use people's names that have been denied? What if the appeal fails? Could be, because right now, the denied delegation, there's no identifying information, right?
Right.
I'm just cautioning, how do we do that without?
So you know what, I think trustees, we are getting into that kind of big discussion, which probably needs some thought. And as I suggested before, maybe a good thing to go back to policy and have a wholesome discussion over there, because there's lots of moving pieces to this. We could make a decision now, approve the policy and understand that it's not working and then come back to the table soon. So once again, let me go around. Let me continue with what I'm doing right now. And Trustee Ohonchanada has a valid concern. So Trustee Ohonchanada, are you okay to add this or not? We can stop the discussion there.
No, not unless I get confirmation of what I've asked that question on, no.
Thank you. So we do not have unanimous consent, Trustee Kennedy. So again, question to trustees. Would you be open to sending this back to policy and have a wholesome discussion there? There seems to be a lot of moving pieces to the puzzle. Trustee Ohonchanada as policy chair.
At this point, I'm kind of between a rock and a hard place. I'd like to put a motion to refer back to policy.
Thank you, Trustee Ohonchanada. We have a motion to refer back to policy by Trustee Ohonchanada. May I have a second up, please?
Saunders.
Seconded by Trustee Saunders. So trustees, we have a motion to refer back to policy moved by Trustee Ohonchanada, seconded by Trustee Saunders. I shall now open up discussion and then we'll take a vote on this. Trustees, do we have questions on this? I see a few hands up. Let me ask Trustee Kennedy, is it your hand up? Do you want to discuss the referring back to policy or not?
Hand it now down, sir.
Thank you. Trustee Bowie, your hand is up. Is it, we'd like to speak to this for something else, but we are talking about the referring back to policy. So seeing no other hands up, trustees, I shall now call the vote on referring policy I06 back to the policy committee. I shall now call the vote. Trustee Murphy?
In favor.
Trustee Saunders? In favor. Trustee Kelly?
Could you come back to me, sir?
Okay. Trustee Bowie?
In favor.
Trustee Chua?
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma?
In favor.
Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
Trustee Powell?
In favor. In favor.
Kennedy?
Opposed.
Trustee Ohonchanada? And Vice Chair Agnew?
I'm opposed as well.
We have 5 in favor, 2 opposed, no abstention. The motion carries. The policy.
Point of order. Sorry, I hadn't voted yet. I
Oh,
told
sorry,
you to come back.
Trustee Kelly?
Oppose.
So we have 5 in favor, 3 opposed, no abstention. The motion carries. The policy will go back to the policy committee for discussion and come back to the board table again. Thank you, trustees, for this wholesome discussion. We shall now move on to the next order of business, which is staff reports. The first item, 10.1, universal washrooms. Superintendent Merrick, please present your reports. Superintendent Merrick, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. This report is in response to a motion brought by trustees back in October of 2022. Staff have examined all HCDSB schools and whether they currently have a Ontario Building Code compliant universal washroom off a main corridor within the school. We also included schools that are currently funded, that are in construction or being planned to be constructed in the next few years. So that brings us to 59 schools in total. And the results from the kind of the high level results, I guess, would be that 14 of our 59 schools have a full universal washroom off a main corridor of the school. We have 17 of the 59 would require minor renovations, which is less than $100,000. And then we have 28 of the 59 schools that would need major changes. I'll say as well, that doesn't mean that the schools don't have single user washrooms within the school, but they're not universal washrooms up to the current Ontario Building Code. We also looked at costing for these universal washrooms, which included construction costs, remediation costs, costs associated with permits, testing, inspections, any design consultants that would be required, and as well as a contingency for any uncertainty accounted for in the project. So all in today dollars, 2022 dollars, the estimated cost is approximately $4.2 million to bring all of our schools up to having a universal washroom that's with the current code. We also looked at funding sources for the that would be available to do this. There are a few funding sources that the ministry provides us for renewal funding that could be used for universal washrooms. Although it's not the main intent of a lot of these funding streams, it is permissible to use it for accessibility issues. So the first stream that could be used it would be proceeds of disposition, which is proceeds from sales of board assets. Could be used, however, we don't have any right now, so it's not available right now, but it could be used in the future. The second source would be school renewal allocation. We get about $5 million a year in school renewal allocation. About $1 million of that goes for amortization of past projects. So we net out about $4 million annually through our SRA grants. And then we also have the school conditioning improvement grant or funding, which is about $5 million. It's announced annually though, and it kind of comes out in 1 year increments. So it's a little less entrenched than the SRA funding stream, but it is out there right now, although maybe not necessarily guaranteed to come in each year. So roughly $9 million available in renewal funding annually. Again, I'll say that the main intent of that is to maintain our core building systems in our schools, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, roofs, windows, etc. But it can be used for accessibility as well. And our board has in the past used a small portion of that for accessibility every year to upgrade our standards in our schools. And I'll also point out that we do have we have about $814 million in current building assets, and we have about $100 million in new assets in construction right now. So it is a very small amount of funding due to in comparison to the assets that we have. But it is, we do have $9 million available annually. So with these constraints in our financial resources, we also have other constraints on our human resources, availability of trades in the marketplace, and our internal project management staff. But I think the best path forward would be a phased approach. And there's a plan presented in your package tonight to go through an implementation and kind of roll out of the washrooms over a 13-year period, doing roughly 3 to 5 washrooms per year. And you can see the kind of the rollout in Appendix A of your package. Under this model, the projects could be combined into our long-term facility renewal strategy, which shows up every year in our long-term capital plan, which comes to board for discussion in May of each year, and trustees can comment there. We could also include our universal washrooms in our facility renewal projects then that would come to board each fall for approval. So trustees would then approve the projects each fall for the projects to be executed the following summer, which we do with all of our, I think we just went through a round of that fairly recently here at board, where the board approved projects for next summer as well. So this would allow the board to review and adapt the plan as funding is realized and student needs are assessed as well. And I would say this doesn't impact our current process for meeting student accommodations in our schools. If a student needs certain accommodations in the school, we would still assess and provide the necessary accommodations for those students. We're talking here only about the plan would only provide universal washroom spaces in schools where a need has not yet been voiced. So kind of a freestanding accommodation in all the schools where a need has not been voiced at the current. So, and then lastly, I'll say as well that there would be an opportunity to expedite if additional financial resources were made available. If there was, additional ministry funding or federal funding came out, we could advance this. We would still be tied by the kind of the human resources aspect of it, where there's only so many trades in the marketplace and only so many internal trades or internal team members here to manage a certain number of projects. But I think we could advance it if there was additional funding available. But kind of the plan presented tonight would be a way to do it without kind of impacting the core condition of our buildings as well, and using a small portion of our renewal funding each year to update our universal washrooms in our schools. So happy to take any questions that trustees may have or any, input that trustees may have as well on that.
Thank you, Superintendent Merrick, for your very detailed report. We have a speakers list here. We have Vice Chair Agnew, Trustee Saunders, and Trustee Murphy. Vice Chair Agnew, you have the floor.
So I know it's a shocker that I'm going to have some questions. First of all, I do want to thank you immensely. I know the amount of work, I'm going to guess the amount of work that went into doing this. So I want to thank you immensely for doing this. I think it's really important that we have this information and that we have some sort of a plan. And, this is not at all personal to anyone, but it's certainly extremely disappointing to see that we have, that we're not accessible to everybody who requires accessibility, and to a great extent. I mean, there's a great number of washrooms that we don't have full accessibility for. And again, it's not personal, nothing we can do. It is what it is. And, I don't want to laugh, but it's amazing to think we have to wait 13 years to have, fully accessible washrooms when we may have students that have moved through our system in that amount of time. So, I would just simply ask that we continue to keep an eye on this, that this continues to be somewhat of a priority somewhere along the line, and that if we do have additional funding come through, and that we keep an eye on this so that we're fully aware that if we have the ability to make a universal washroom, and we can do that. And then just, you did answer my question a little bit, Superintendent Merrick, but with respect to a student or a staff or someone, a regular visitor, someone that requires a fully accessible washroom, how are we handling that from a financial perspective?
Superintendent Merrick.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. We would still assess the needs of the student and then provide the facilities that are required. So we do have a small portion of our budget that's set up for to provide those accommodations in our schools through our my operating and maintenance budget. We typically go way beyond that in almost every school year, and we have to find funds from other places to support that as well. But we do find a way to accommodate them in our schools.
Thank you. Vice Chair Action. Yeah, go ahead.
So just a follow up, and this may be a rhetorical, but what do we honestly do in a situation where we have a visitor to our school? Let's say it's not, but and they can't use a washroom facility. Like I'm thinking about even here at the CEC. Like, I mean, what do we do in those situations where we have someone come into our school, a teacher that goes to another location? We know that we do have teachers who do have disabilities, or we have someone come into our schools to speak, or we have someone come in. What do we do in those situations? I mean, it's just, to me, it's human rights, right?
Superintendent Merrick.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. We would have the same kind of accommodation process for staff as well. I think we need to be thoughtful in our planning about where we're planning activities then, and making sure that that they are accessible to all possible participants as well.
Thank you. Next up is Trustee Saunders. Trustee Saunders, you have the floor.
Yeah, through you, Superintendent Merrick, could you just describe, so the ones that are of lesser expense versus the ones that are higher? Would the lesser expense ones be putting like the grab bars in and lowering sinks versus the more expensive one? Would that be like ripping out a whole washroom and redesigning it?
Superintendent Merrick.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. It tended to be the more expensive ones, or ones where, you know, perhaps there's the washroom facility there, but it's not big enough to accommodate all of the items that we would need in the universal washroom within that space. So you need to move the block walls have to move back, which is, you know, then you're into very extensive, very costly accommodations there then. So the smaller ones, you know, maybe it's a bigger space and we can accommodate within that space and kind of bring it up to code. But I mean, a lot of our schools, I mean, there's been various iterations of, you know, universal washrooms of the current term for accessible washrooms. Before that, it was accessible washrooms. Before that, it was barrier-free washrooms. Before that, it was handicap washrooms. So it's really evolved over time, but the kind of the demands have grown. So all of our schools have, you know, depending on when it was built, has various iterations of what that design requirement was at the time.
Thank you. Trustee Saunders, do you have a follow-up? Thank you. Next up is Trustee Murphy. Trustee Murphy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if you already answered it with Trustee Saunders' question, but I guess my clarification is, what are the main differences? And I just don't know the difference. I don't know the building code, but between a universal and a single-use accessible, like what are the major things that are missing? I'm just trying to understand that.
Thank you. Superintendent Merrick, could you respond?
Yeah, thank you, through Mr. Chair. So we only have, I think it's 2 schools that we have that don't have a single user washroom accessible for students, which would just be, you know, it could be any washroom, a water closet, a small washroom that's accessible to students. However, a universal washroom has very specific requirements in the code. A few of those things would be, you know, a 1.7 meter turning circle within the washroom. It's got to have room for an adult change table. It doesn't have to have a change table, but it has to have room for an adult change table. Emergency pull station, you know, specific washroom accessories at certain heights, coat hooks at certain heights, barrier-free sinks, grab bars, door widths, like very specific building code items have to be part of that to be classified as a universal washroom. And all new construction has to have one. So as we're doing new builds, they have to have one. And as we do new additions even, whenever we pull a building permit, the requirement is that the facility has a universal washroom in it. And I'd say, like, universal washroom is the current term right now. It will likely evolve to a different place in the future where I'm not sure what the term would be beyond universal, but there'll be something come up beyond that that'll be a different term in the future as well.
Thank you. Trustee Murphy, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just about the turning room, like is there in the current accessible, like what's could anything be retrofitted, or is it the turning room that's the main barrier?
Superintendent Merrick.
Yeah, the turning circle is a big barrier because you need clearance between the toilet, the sink, the door, and the spot for the change table. So you need kind of a 1.7 meter circle within the middle of the washroom, which means your wall distances have to be a certain height or a certain distance as well. So.
Thank you. And we have Vice Chair Agnew. You have your hand up.
Yeah, I just have a question. So when you say single, just so for clarification purposes, when you say a single use washroom accessible to students, it doesn't mean that it's fully outfitted as being fully accessible, correct? No, right. So I think that is, so when they're saying single use facility, it doesn't mean it's inaccessible. It's just accessible to students. It doesn't mean it's an accessible washroom, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're saying single user. So like it's more like not like our boys and girls washrooms that have many stalls and you know, many sinks in them. It's a one person washroom, if you will, but it's definitely not accessible up to the current code.
Thank you. And I see Trustee Ohonchanada, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. My question is just, and I think I know the answer to it, but has the ministry ever provided funding for, let's say, accessibility or another term in the past at all, ever?
Superintendent Merrick.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. They have not provided dedicated funding for accessibility improvements in schools.
Thank you. Trustee Ohonchanada?
No, thank you for the answer.
Okay, I see no other hands up. So Superintendent Merrick, thank you for presenting your detailed report and it's appreciated. Moving on to next item, next staff report, current trends in learning gaps. Superintendent Kroll, could you please present your report?
Good evening, trustees. Happy to be here this evening, along with our curriculum coordinator, Christy Davidson, who will be assisting me with the report. This report took a lot of work from a lot of different departments. So it was certainly leaned heavily on research departments. So thank you to Jennifer McDonald and Lisa Collmore, as well as input from special education and our student success departments. As you'll recall that this report came out of a motion from the October 18th board meeting. So over the last couple of years, we've been looking at the impact of school lockdowns and shifts to and from remote learning. And despite the very sort of strong efforts that we made to remove barriers for students to access education during periods of remote learning, we definitely observed that it was challenging for students to maintain effort and stay engaged. And as a parent, I saw that myself when my own kids were in lockdown, right? It's difficult for them to stay engaged and be motivated in the way that they were when they're with their teacher. And the data that we have shows that students may have learning gaps or unfinished learning. Our staff have been working tirelessly since March 2020 to ensure that those gaps are being addressed and that students can continue to be successful on their chosen pathways through grade 12. So the data sources that we used for this survey was a learning recovery survey. So ones that we developed in-house with the help of research with Dr. Collmore and Jen McDonald. We were very successful in getting data from our secondary teachers. And the reason that we were so successful is because we actually did it, had them complete the survey on a PA day. So when we had their attention, we didn't have that opportunity with elementary teachers. So you'll see that the response rate for elementary is much lower. Although the data is still there, I just sort of want to note that for you. So we had 280 respondents from elementary and 680 respondents from secondary. The second source of data that we used was EQAO data. You would likely be aware that EQAO data was published this fall for the first time since pre-pandemic. So the last time we would have had EQAO data was the 2018-2019 school year. We do have EQAO data to sort of, we'll bring sort of a teaser trailer for you on EQAO data tonight, and sort of we'll follow up with a further report on EQAO data. But a couple of things to note. So we are sort of sharing results from the grade 3 and grade 6 literacy and numeracy, as well as grade 9 math and the grade 10 OSSLT. To note that the testing was on pause for 2 years during the pandemic. When we met with the Ministry of Education and boards met with the Ministry of Education and with EQAO this fall, both the ministry and EQAO were clear that the format is different than pre-pandemic and that the curriculum is different than pre-pandemic. So they suggest strongly not making comparisons to pre-pandemic data, but that this is new baseline data that boards can use. And so their advice was to strongly avoid trying to make apples to apples comparisons between old data and current data. So I just wanted to set the stage for what we're bringing. I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful curriculum coordinator, Christy Davidson, who's going to actually get into the sort of the meat of the report.
And I'm pleased to say that despite the cautions that Superintendent Kroll has sort of given us and got us started with, our students are doing quite well when you look at the EQAO data. So there's some highlights there for you. There's also a link out to the news report from November when these were first shared publicly. But the data for elementary does show that our students are performing above and significantly above the provincial average in all areas. So that's reading, writing, and mathematics. So then we look at that and we couple that with the educator survey and the data that our teachers and our educators gave us. And they're identifying some learning gaps, some unfinished learning for students. It's a little bit different depending on the division. So we noticed that, for example, kindergarten teachers were slightly less likely to identify larger gaps in learning compared to, say, an intermediate teacher. Okay, that was one of the things that emerged from the data. In terms of subject areas and specific things, if you're looking to pinpoint, we're seeing reading, mathematics, and writing emerging as areas that they've given us some feedback on. Okay. Along with that initial ask about, how are students doing compared to pre-pandemic, we also asked educators to talk about what's working well, what's happening in classrooms right now, how are you addressing those needs currently. And you can see that in the table here in the report, where they have identified some of the strategies that are working really well in our classrooms. And some of those highlights would be things like small group instruction, daily practice, and reteaching of basic skills. Having said that, teachers still, absolutely are dealing with a wide range and maybe a wider range of abilities in their classrooms than pre-pandemic. And so they have expressed a need for, support with things like student behavioral issues, mental health, special education supports, in order to help students sort of recover or complete that unfinished learning. So those are, in broad strokes, some of the results that we saw from elementary. Now, if we look at our secondary data, you're going to see many comparisons, many similarities. So again, if we start off with EQAO, our data shows that our students performed above or significantly above the provincial average in both the grade 9 assessment of mathematics and the Ontario Secondary School Literacy Test. So they did quite well on those assessments. And then the educator survey likewise highlighted many of the same things that the elementary survey did. So teachers, do you feel like that students have some unfinished learning as a result of the pandemic, that there are some challenges? Specifically, we were asked to report by department. So math, science, English, and technological education emerged as departments that felt the struggles were more than some of the other departments who reported that things were about the same compared to pre-pandemic learning conditions. Special education and student success also was an area that was sort of flagged from the educator survey. Remembering that these are teachers' perceptions of how their students are doing, and so that would be reflecting the data from CERTs and student success teachers who would have caseloads and portfolios that deal with those vulnerable populations of learners. And so that's what's reflected in that sort of subset of data. Okay. In terms of skills, again, lots of the same things here. So teachers are using things like small group instruction, daily practice, and reteaching of basic skills. And once again, they identified the need for additional supports to help students who have struggled and are struggling, such as tutoring, addressing student behavioral issues, and mental health support. So those are some of the big picture findings about how students are doing and what some of the unfinished learning looks like. So the other part of this motion is, what's our plan to go forward? So first of all, I'd like to highlight that, the ministry has a plan, the Ontario Learning Recovery Plan, and that's been set as a priority for all school boards, and we are taking a look at that plan throughout 3 professional activity days this year. And that plan, as you can see in the report, concentrates on things such as measuring and assessing the impacts of learning disruption, comprehensive tutoring supports, mental health and well-being, strengthening student literacy and numeracy skills, and then modernizing education with a focus on what comes next, the world of work. So then we have the task. We've got the data, we've taken a look at the ministry plan. Now, what are we going to do with this data? So based on all of those sources that we've talked about so far, we identified 3 key areas for us to focus on within our board throughout this school year. And those are student mental health and well-being, flexible interventions, and strengthening academic learning skills. And as you'll see in the report, there is a non-exhaustive yet extensive list of things that are currently underway in our schools to address some of those areas of need that we're seeing. I'll highlight a couple of them for you so you can get a sense. Under student health and well-being, we have the creation and implementation of the annual mental health and addiction action plan, which gives sort of a framework for supporting students with mental health and well-being. They have 4 specific key priorities as listed in the report. We're also offering more tier 1 evidence-based strategy programs in all schools. So if you think of that tiered model of intervention like a triangle, the tier 1 interventions are sort of that bottom layer. So the things that are going to make impact on a lot of students and can meet the needs of a wide range of students. So those are things like Stop Now and Plan, Mind Up, Bell Let's Talk Day. So things that can address the needs of a wide variety of our students. We're also focused on capacity building around culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy, as well as trauma-informed classroom practices. So just that recognition that the experiences that students have had in their lives and throughout the pandemic, as well as their identities, impact, their ability to feel like they belong and be a part of the classroom environment. So that's some of the work we're doing with staff in partnership with the Human Rights and Equity Department. Under the second category of flexible and responsive interventions, I talked a little bit about tier 1. Now we start to look at tier 2, or a little bit more targeted support for a smaller group of students. We're doing things like implementing the tutoring program. We have a really high number of students that have taken us up on the tutoring resources that have been made available. There's a lot of partnership and joint initiatives happening between curriculum and special education in order to target early literacy and numeracy skills. And there's also been funding and resources dedicated to hiring extra staff to support those areas, as well as programs in service of this goal. And then the last area is strengthening academic learning skills. So I think all of us in program services, as we're doing capacity building and PD with staff this year, this is part of our focus. So especially differentiated instruction, or different types of instruction to meet the needs of all learners. So there's no need for our students to all be learning the same thing in the same way at the same time. So how we can be addressing strategies and skills and showing and helping teachers with implementation of differentiated instruction strategies. And we're looking at the new curricula that's been released from the ministry. So the grade 1 to 9 math curriculum is new. We're deepening our understanding of that. We're investing in resources towards that goal. We also have courses being de-streamed, some for the first time. That's an area of focus with our subject councils and at our secondary sites, as well as the early literacy program and Flyleaf, and taking a look at our strategies for early reading and instruction. Then I'll turn it over to Superintendent Kroll to.
Thanks, Christy. So, what we certainly know is that there's a need for continued and targeted interventions for students, and that this is going to take time, right? That this is going to take a long period of sustained effort to improve student mental health, student well-being, and their own academic skills. So we have sort of short-term catch-up plans that we feel we are strongly integrated with our board's longer-term strategic plan and our upcoming board improvement plan as well. So we could talk all night about this. I won't do that to you, but I certainly welcome any questions of clarification or questions that we can further unpack. We do have representatives from research as well if there's questions specific to the data that we collected, and we may lean on some of our family schools or our program services friends if needed as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Kroll, and thank you, Ms. Davidson. When I read the report, it was so much in detail that it was mind-blowing, but thank you so much for that detailed report. So let me open up the floor to trustees for questions. I see Vice Chair Agnew, you have your hand up.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So I don't mean this to come out the way it is, but when you just said, Superintendent Kroll, about, talking about time, right? It's going to take time to do this, but what about when we don't have time? What about when we have those students, let's say in our high school system, who have come, who have been impacted because of pandemic, and high school, university is looming. And I know some of those students are making their way out that would have been affected, but there are still students that are there that are in the middle of this. And we know that they are feeling this. So how are we looking to sort of how are we looking to prioritize when time isn't on our side, if you will?
Sure.
Superintendent Grohl?
Sure, I can certainly, it's like, what I certainly want to emphasize is like, we're not bringing you the plan that we're going to roll out, right? We're bringing you the sort of the interventions that are already in place. There's also a lot of existing structures that exist in high schools that are there to support kids, like credit recovery. We have student success teachers. We have our guidance counselors. So there's a number of resources in the schools already that we can leverage in addition to the additional tutoring supports. We've also asked our secondary teachers very specifically through their school principals to take the time to get to know your students, take the time to understand what their individual gifts and abilities are, what are some gaps you identify early on in the semester, so that it's less this year about teaching the curriculum and it's more about teaching the student in front of you and the needs that they're presenting. So when we talk about differentiated instruction, it's because we really want our teachers to take the time. Our PD, all of that right now is focused on know your learner, know what their, know their gifts and know their challenges right now. So I would say if we can do any one thing right now, it's teach the kids in front of us.
Thank you,
Yeah. So so differentiated learning. We hear that a lot, and I think it's sometimes hard to process exactly what that means. But this is a perfect example of what that looks like. So when we look at that, we probably, well, I know we do. We have teachers that have different teaching styles. They've been teaching a particular subject for a really long time. They're used to teaching it in a certain way. And now they're sort of, maybe having to shift the way they're doing things because of the approach that they're taking. And so in those situations, how is that working? Are teachers taking the initiative to sort of reach out to say, I need some assistance in shifting the way I'm doing this? Or do we have our, superintendent sort of jumping in to say, how are you doing this? How is this working? Just to make sure that, someone who doesn't ask for help is still getting that help, and making sure that they can address that student that's in front of them.
Superintendent Grohl?
Sure, and certainly through you, Mr. Chair. Our curriculum staff is busy. Our spec ed staff is busy. Our student success staff are busy meeting the needs of educators that are saying, I want to do this, but I don't know how. And so we have a global responsibility to offer PD to people so they can attend workshops and learn more. But we have a boots on the ground approach to make sure that if staff are saying, I don't know how to do this, we've got people that can go into schools and work with them. So itinerants and consultants.
Thank you. On the speakers list is Trustee Saunders, Trustee Hunchanada, Trustee Kirsten, Kelly, and Trustee Bowe. You have a big list here. Just go to this. Okay. So Trustee Saunders, you have the floor.
So just a quick question. So like in terms of sort of mental health, like active engagement, I think a lot of the kids that really need help are maybe the ones that are least, apparent. Do we have like a board psychologist that works with teachers if they identify maybe there's an issue, the grades are falling or the behavior has changed? Do we have like sort of like an active engagement? Because and I'll tell you what I'm thinking about. Like when I was in high school, I went to a Jesuit high school and they had one of the priests was a psychologist, and they always, I think if they saw something unusual, you'd end up talking to this fellow. And do we have something like that where we we may identify a kid that maybe they've lost a lot of weight and they think maybe there's an anorexia issue here or something? Do we do that kind of stuff?
Superintendent Grohl?
Sure, and through you, Mr. Chair, we don't have Jesuit priests in our school, but what we do have, and I'll certainly invite Superintendent Paola to comment as well. Our teachers are obviously the sort of first point of contact, and they're the ones that are going to notice those kind of day-to-day changes that you're talking about. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's a lot of infrastructure within our schools, both elementary and secondary, that are there to support. So our child and youth counselors, our social workers, our credit recovery teachers, our student success teachers, our chaplains are all people that can provide that sort of tier 2 or tier 3 intervention. And for students that are sort of in like significant peril, like as you identify, that's where a social worker and the sort of the special education department and social work would be there to sort of make sure that the students getting both the support within the school and also external to the community.
Thank you. Trustee Saunders, you have follow-up? No? Okay. Trustee Hunchanada, you have the floor.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Superintendent Carl and Ms. Davidson. Fulsome report. Thank you for that. I'm just wondering what your plans are, and I'm glad the report came out and said you're already doing things. It's not like you're waiting to produce a report and then starting your actions plans. Are your plans to reintroduce, maybe to run a survey again in 6 months without a motion coming from the table, but just to do it again?
Superintendent Grohl?
Yeah, you know what, like we've talked a bit about that. Like this work is iterative, right? It's not like we get to this point and say, okay, well, we've accomplished it, right? So getting data from our teachers, right? at different moments in time is always incredibly helpful. I think part of what we're really looking forward to, as well as looking at this year, is okay, so what does this year's EQO data look like? What does that tell us, right? Is it better, worse, different than what we saw from previous year students? We're also waiting to sort of look at report card data, right? So we're just coming up to the end of term 1 in elementary and semester 1 in secondary. And so when we can look at things like class averages, class medians, we can look at credit accumulation rates in secondary. We can look at also the choices that students are making. So an example would be coming out of grade 9 D-streamed math or grade 9 D-streamed science. Which of those students are choosing academic science in grade 10 or academic math in grade 10 versus those that are now choosing applied? In terms of de-streaming, like that's something, those are questions that are ongoing that we're going to be continuing to look at with support from student success and research over the next couple of years. That'll better inform the next moves that we need to make to better support those students.
Thank you.
So sorry, to answer your question, yes, we'd like to do more surveying of staff.
Trustee Ohan, you have a follow-up?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Kelly, you have the floor next.
All right, thank you. And through you, Chair, you did just a great presentation, and you did answer my question about de-streamed students, because I realized that would be a concern, especially among freshmen who do have that learning gap and may not choose academic, even if they were an academic student, and may go into applied, which is a almost permanent decision. But I do have a different clarification question, unrelated to that, but thank you for that response. I did know that you mentioned that there will be tutoring supports that will be provided, and I know that it will be provided through community partners and HCDSB staff. Would staff be trained to support and or accommodate students with accessibility needs? For example, students who have LDs or IEPs, like especially for the tutoring?
Superintendent Kroll?
Certainly. So we've looked at a number of different ways to provide tutoring. So tutoring has looked like secondary teachers running extra math help at secondary schools. Tutoring has looked like elementary teachers offering face-to-face small group instruction. It's looked like elementary teachers offering online support. It's also looked at partnerships with organizations like LDAH, the Learning Disabilities Association of Halton, and other organizations to specifically meet those needs of kids that our staff might not be best suited for. So we've tried it like a real blended approach, and we're continuing to sort of modify our approach to be able to make sure that we can get the maximum return for the money that the ministry gave us to meet the maximum number of students and their needs. So I would say that the answer to your question is yes.
No follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Trustee Bowie. Trustee Bowie, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I have a quick question under student mental health and well-being, just a follow-up question based on something that we've been talking about for a while, about the mental health literacy lessons that are being offered in our religion classes. I was just wondering what the timeline is for that, because I know it's something that we've been talking about for a while and something that we are involved in. Has that been implemented yet, or is that something that's going to be implemented soon?
Superintendent Kroll?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. That was implemented last September. So we did our first round of training with our religion teachers and department heads back in September 2021. Sorry, 21. And then we did, we did a second session in semester 2 to make sure that any teachers that didn't get that training got it. And we just redid the training in the September to make sure that any semester 1 teachers got that training. And we'll offer it again in February or March for teachers that may have missed that. So we're in the second year of implementing that. And so all those students should have received those lessons.
Thank you, Trustee Bowie. You have a follow-up?
Yeah, just a question of clarification. So what I'm hearing is that it should have been, is it an explicit separate lesson that should be offered to every student that's taking a religion course currently?
Superintendent Kroll?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Kroll. Thank you, Ms. Davidson and Dr. Collymore and team. And there's a lot of work happening in the background. Thank you so much for this extensive report. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Moving on to our next order of business, which is information items. 11.1, student trustee update. Student trustees, please present your report. Who's starting the report? Trustee Bowie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. So I'll be covering achieving for today. A lot to talk about tonight, so stick with us for a bit. But the first thing on all of our minds is exam and culminating season. So the semester is coming to an end in secondary school. It's a very busy time, but we are happy to announce that we're seeing in our schools exam study sessions, extra resources, tutoring supports, and all the things that Superintendent Crowell mentioned. We can confirm that that is happening. I myself have participated in some of them. Furthermore, we've been especially busy this time of year because student trustee elections are upcoming, occurring on February 21st at St. Ignatius of Loyola. So we've been busy answering questions, reaching out to potential candidates, preparing resources for candidates who prepared to submit their preliminary nomination packages yesterday. So that was the deadline for that preliminary nomination. Now that they've been submitted to their school principals, we are entering the second phase of elections, during which candidates compete for their school's nomination. Following the submissions of nominees to the director, we will hold the general elections in front of the Student Senate. To help interested candidates have a greater understanding of the roles and responsibilities of a student trustee, we hosted an information session last week, the recording of which can be found on the board's YouTube channel using that specific link there. Furthermore, this election cycle has been busier than ever before, and we are very excited by the number of potential candidates who have reached out. It is likely that we are anticipating that it will be one of our most competitive elections thus far. So, very exciting. We are also in the process of planning a retreat for the Student Senate. That will be on exam turnaround day on Friday, February 3rd. It will include sessions on student leadership, mental health, and school climate. We're very excited. We have some great guest speakers coming. We have the mental health leadership team coming and doing a workshop with the Student Senate, as well as a bunch of guest speakers and breakout sessions. So we're very excited. A lot of planning has gone into that. That will be also at Loyola. In addition, the Student Senate ratified the formation of an ad hoc Constitution Reform Committee at our December General Senate meeting, which is chaired by myself. It has the goal of revising the Constitution prior to the beginning of the next Student Senate term, so next September, to better reflect the mission and the operations of the Senate as it is in its current state.
So I will be doing the believing portion of our update. So starting the student trustees, hope that everyone had a restful and reflective Christmas break, and we commemorate the Catholic Faith in Action Subcommittee for their amazing work during the Christmas season. Coming out of a contemplative Advent season, we're excited to continue our work, bringing a renewed dedication to the students and the entire HCDSB community through the lens of faith. The Catholic Faith in Action Subcommittee is also planning to partner with the HCCF to participate in the upcoming 24-hour fast in March.
And I will be covering the belonging section. I will say, if you want to follow up with us, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at HCDSB Senate. You can see all the fun things we do. So for belonging, alongside the Student Senate Ad Hoc Constitution Reform Committee, the Student Senate voted unanimously in favor to create the Student Senate's Ad Hoc Indigenous Education Committee. This committee, chaired by myself, has the goal to promote the grade 11 Indigenous Education class, MBE3U or MBE3C, and through a promotional video aimed to be published and shown to all of our grade 10 students before course selection for the 2023-2024 school year. And in addition, the student trustees attended the student census consultation held last Tuesday, held by Dr. Colin Moore and her team, and many of the staff and students consulted voiced their concerns and initial expectations on the data shared about the school climate and student perspective. And all the data shared was expected results, but is still alarming. And we hope that we can utilize this data as student trustees and as a board of trustees to foster belonging for all of our students.
Thank you for your report. I see a couple of hands up. Trustee Vice Chair Agnew, you have the floor.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Just excellent report as always. But just a comment about your session. Well done. You did a fantastic job. I can see I think the fruits of your labor coming through probably on the interest that's been generated. So just an excellent job. Anyone who has not watched the video yet, you need to take a look at it. You did a great job. So just a kudos to you for for doing that, for just reaching out and doing that, and having the decision to come together and present the information in the way that you have. And I think it's been really instrumental, perhaps, in some of those people making a decision to put their name forward. So well done.
Thank you, Trustee Kelly. You have your hand up. You have the floor.
Yep, thank you, and through you, Chair. Amazing presentation. It's always inspiring to hear about what the many bright and young students are doing, both in Student Senate and applying for the student trustee role. So it's always exciting to see how involved all the students want to be. I do just have one question. I don't know if you would have this information now, but how many candidates do you know are there for the student trustee elections?
Student trustees?
So we don't have that exact data because, as you well know, Trustee Kelly, it's on an individual school by school basis. So we would have to corroborate all of the interested applicants at each individual school level, which we don't have that data. But we did have over 30 interested candidates attend the information session, which is pretty good. We had more that watched it. We have a number of people that have reached out to us after the session, as well as a number of senators at various levels of the organization who've expressed interest in running. So we expect that even in regions that haven't been as competitive in the past, we're seeing some schools for the first time have individual nomination elections at their schools, which is very exciting. That doesn't normally happen in some schools. So overall, it's much more competitive, which I would attribute likely to us, emerging from the pandemic and some of the great work that the Senate has done over the past couple of years to promote sort of involvement in the student trustee role. But we're very excited. It's definitely been more than we've seen in the past 2 years, for sure.
Thank you. And Trustee Kelly, do you have a follow-up?
No, that's great to hear. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, Trustee Ohan-Chanada, you have the floor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. And I was going to say a little thing what Trustee Agnew mentioned, but I was there at the live session and I can validate and scaffold for you. If any of the candidates don't know what to expect, oh, they know what to expect. I was a little nervous myself listening to that. And you were very clear and they know what's expected. And really how much work the three of you put in is absolutely amazing. So I'm very proud of you. We're all very proud of the work you do. And I really honestly didn't know how much work you do. Really good grammar until I was listening to that session. So well done. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. I did not see any other hands up. So trustees, student trustees, thank you for your report as usual. Well done. Moving on down to the next item, on the information item, we have construction update. Superintendent Merrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, we have 2 projects on the construction report for January. The first being the Milton No. 9 Catholic Elementary School. You can see from the photos there, we have foundations and masonry going in, getting out of the ground, out of the very muddy ground there. We also have site services going in as well. Next month, we'll continue on with footings and services, and moving on to load-bearing walls and underground plumbing as well. And then the second project in the report is the Milton No. 3 Catholic Elementary School. That's the St. Kateri building. And you can see now we're on site. We have equipment on site. Layouts have been done, and foundations are our first pour for foundations was yesterday actually. So we're off to the races on Milton No. 3 as well. So happy to take any questions that trustees may have on those 2 projects.
Thank you, Superintendent Merrick. Trustees, do we have any questions for Superintendent Merrick? Seeing none, thank you, Superintendent Merrick, for your update. We shall now move on to item 11.3, OCSTA update. Trustee Ohan-Chanada.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, just a few items that I want to bring to our attention. It's in our package, but OCSTA's having their annual trustee seminar actually this weekend. So hopefully a majority of us are going to attend. They have very worthwhile, informative breakout sessions. That's happening this weekend in Etobicoke. Currently, we have a deadline to provide any potential resolutions that we want to put forward to the OCSTA committee. Our deadline for that is January 31st. If anyone has any questions or concerns or not quite sure what that means, please reach out to myself and even Chair Dwart or Vice Chair Agnew can help with that support. We've created, well, we haven't created, but OCSTA created a large advisory board. This is new this year and it came out of a resolution from the AGM last year. So on these advisory boards, we send a designate or delegate. So this year, Trustee Agnew will be sitting on our behalf of the large advisory board supported by OCSTA completely. And Trustee Saunders will be an alternate. And congratulations to both. And thank you both for taking on this added responsibility.
Thank you, Trustee Ohan-Chanada, for the work that you've been doing with the OCST and the various committees you sit on. And thank you for the initiative in reaching out to trustees and coming up with our representatives, Trustee Vice Chair Agnew and Trustee Saunders. We look forward to the good work being done there. Moving on to our next order of business, which is miscellaneous information. Give me a second, trustees. Let's get organized here. Trying to get organized. Sorry about that. So we are on miscellaneous information. We have notices of motions that were pulled out from the consent agenda. 12.2, 12.3, 12.4, 12.5, and 12.6. All this relate to the bylaw corrections or amendments, which will go directly to policy. And from policy, a discussion will happen over there, and whatever result from the results from there will come back to the board as an action item in subsequent meeting. So these are the notices of motions. It's in your package. Item 12.7 is the notice of motion again. It's in your package. There is no discussion here. It's by Vice Chair Agnew. And the notice of motion is in your package. It will be an action item in the next board meeting. Moving on to our next order of business, which is correspondence. We have one item, which is correspondence 13.1. And our next order of business, it's in a package. Next order of business is open question period. We have one question submitted so far, and let me get to that question. Thank you for submitting the questions in advance, and we have time to get the answer. Question is, Bill 23 has restricted the ability of our cities and towns in Halton to collect development charges drastically. Does Bill 23 restrict our board's ability to collect educational development charges in any way? I'll pass this question to Director Klein. Director Klein.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, and I thank Superintendent Lofts as well. It's a good question. So although Bill 23 does impact municipalities, no changes were made to the legislation that governs education development charges, also known as EDC. Thus, the municipalities will continue to collect EDCs for the Halton Catholic District School Board when issuing residential and non-residential development building permits.
Thank you, Director Klein. That was the only question submitted for open question period. Next order of business is open in camera. We do not have to go in camera. Resolution regarding absentees. We have all trustees present tonight, so we do not need a resolution. And finally, adjournment and closing prayer. May I have a, sorry, I'm just seeing a hand up here. Trustee Kennedy.
May I ask an open question?
We have passed that. Is it something that we?
I had my hand up before you.
Oh, I did not see that. Okay. I'll go back to you, give you that opportunity.
Just an open question. Back in December, we had a staff survey, and we discussed about the student survey. I believe was done in April of 2022. The discussion mentioned that we might get those results in January. We're at the end of January. Will that be coming likely in February?
Thank you, Trustee Kennedy. I recollect that conversation, Director Klein.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we could do that in February.
Thank you, Trustee Kennedy, for the question. And we were at adjournment and closing prayer. May I have a motion to adjourn? I know where to look now. So Trustee Saunders moves. Looking for a seconder.
I'll second it.
Trustee Ohan Chanada, all in favor? Anybody opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. Trustee Carabella, could you please lead us in the closing prayer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to bring our attention to the feast day of the conversion of St. Paul, which is next Wednesday, January the 25th. Let us honor that great moment in the life of St. Paul, his conversion on the road to Damascus, after which he then gave his life for the church and proclaiming the faith tirelessly. And the year of St. Paul was declared by Pope Benedict XVI from June, we remember, 2008 to 2009. So please join me in the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. As we say the prayer for the year of St. Paul. Glorious St. Paul, most zealous apostle, martyr for the love of Christ, give us a deep faith, a steadfast hope, a burning love for our Lord, so that we can proclaim with you, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Help us to become apostles, serving the church with a pure heart, witnesses to her truth and beauty amidst the darkness of our days. With you we praise God our Father. To him be the glory in the church and in Christ, now and forever. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
And thank you everyone for this wonderful meeting. Good night.